another episode of The Dancing Professor. Today's topic will be about vigilance, and to help us talk about that is my friend Chris Murphy. Now, before we get to learning about Chris's job, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what vigilance is in the realm of cognitive psychology. So vigilance is defined as the ability to maintain sustained attention for long periods of time. The whole idea of vigilance studies and experiments came about in the 1940s when Norman Mackworth conducted vigilance studies on sonar and radar operators during World War II. He realized that the operators' progress and ability to detect targets would decrease at about 10 to 15% after 30 minutes. And then from that point, it would gradually continue to decrease. So of course, this could be related to things like cognitive workload and high task demand. And so to actually understand how now that, World War II is thankfully over, right, we still conduct vigilance studies, and we see a lot of vigilance experiments with particular professions like TSA, airport security, air traffic control. And so to talk to us today about that, we have Chris Murphy. Chris, could you tell our viewers a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, currently I work right now at YouTube Security with the Google company. I have previously left from working at TSA, San Francisco International Airport with Covenant Aviation, and I was there for 9.5 years.
Wow, 9.5 years.
9.5.
And so you mentioned aviation, which is actually really interesting because, again, aviation is where human factors got its birth, right? Yeah. Human factors was all about how humans interact with, now we call them computers, but at that time it was machines, right? And warcraft and aircraft and things like that. And actually what happened was operators or pilots who were flying these planes, particularly the B-52, there were two very similar looking controls where one would release the landing gear and the other would actually release a missile. And so what was happening is that because the controls were very similar in appearance, when task demands were really high, workload was really high, they would end up pulling the wrong trigger, and a lot of planes ended up crashing. So that's actually how human factors originated, so it's really cool that you actually are related to this sector.
And I actually have a great uncle who flew B-52s.
No way!
Yes.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So you mentioned TSA.
Yes.
So could you tell us what TSA stands for?
Transportation Security Administration.
All right, and what do you do as a TSA?
When I was working there, I started back in May 2006. At that time, we would operate the X-ray machine and the metal detector, which basically just waving people through, making sure you don't beep, and then performing partial pat-downs and use the handheld metal detector, which then over the years evolved into using the imager machines, which then now scan your bodies. And I was in charge of training the first 3 groups for SFO during a pilot program.
Wow.
To learn the machine, to see where the faults were at, and yeah, so.
So speaking of faults, so human factors is all about human error versus design error, right? And of course, a lot of technology is designed to improve our lives, and in fact, it does. But sometimes, it's faulty, and sometimes it does make mistakes. So, what are some of the things that you have seen in your job where the human is actually better than the machine at detecting things?
Well, speaking on the imager machine, the imager machine was designed to have 2 scans. When we first had it, we tested it out. We determined that it took too long to get one passenger through, since everybody was normally used to having to go through a metal detector, which made it much faster. You just walked in, as long as you didn't beep, you're good to go.
Okay.
With the imager machine, you had technically you had 2 stances you had to have, was hands above your head,
right, and
one forward. That was how you cleared the sides. But once we figured out that it took almost 4 times longer to get one passenger through, TSA, in my previous company, they thought to make it much easier was having the 1 stance.
Okay.
So when we had an image operator who would look at the image itself, we could determine whether that was a clothing, something along those lines, or if they had a weapon or something on the sides.
Does it appear in a different color?
Yeah, you would see the orientation of the body.
Okay.
I mean, let's put it this way. We know that the American public isn't the most in shape. I think we lead the world in being obese. So you could definitely see somebody who had more body, and if something was on top of that.
Okay.
The problem is when the public in other parts of the country, and they had situations where people, I think, were falling asleep in these rooms, and just because of the low flow of passengers coming through, you're in a warm room for 30 minutes to an hour, it just tends to happen. Or if people have their personal cell phones in there. Granted, we never want to take any pictures of that because, like I said, you don't see anything to determine how the person's body really looks.
Right, right.
But the public got word, and TSA adapted to going to more of an automated computer system. The problem with that is the computer can only see so much, can only program itself to see so much in a person's body more than a human eye. So there were times to where you would see something as a person would walk out, something that would be sticking out in the side, but the computer would say it's clear.
Okay.
And so then it came to the human factor for us to say whether we were going to pat them down or let them go.
Okay, so fine. So let's say I walk through the machine and I don't beep. But
That's the metal detector, yes.
That's the metal detector. Okay, but so the imagery machine would show that extra.
If you had that would show if you had metal or an organic mass. The imagery machine was designed for, I don't remember the gentleman's name who had the underwear bomb, because he figured out that TSA, we don't screen there.
Okay.
So that's where TSA learned that we have this huge hole.
Wow.
And so the metal detectors only detected metal, so we need something that would see some organic mass.
Okay.
Okay.
So, but do you have the right to pat down anyone that walks out? Like if they,
yes.
Okay, you do. So
if we felt that somebody was walking through and they had something in their pockets, more likely a lot of times people have tissue, their wallet that you tend to forget. But they always say use your gut instinct. When you feel something in your gut saying that something's not right, it's better to check it out.
Okay, cool. So that's really fascinating. So I travel a lot, and I traveled to Europe actually. I just came back from there, and I realized that in European airports they don't ask you to take off your shoes, and they actually have a joke about Americans and American airports and how you have to take off shoes. So why is it that some places do the shoes thing, do the belt thing, whereas like others don't? Do you have any idea about why?
I can only speak for at least America. I mean, I can speak for, when they had the shoe bomber and stuff like that. The belt is typically the reason we ask for a belt off is more if you're going through a metal detector. Belts tend to beep. If you go through the imager, it's going to show up. So for us, especially as screeners, we don't want to touch you. That is our goal. We don't want to touch you. So if we ask you to remove your belt, it's because we know that when you go through, it's going to trigger something to where now we have to ask you to remove it,
and then
and we got to pat down your whole waist, and that's not something we want to do. We want to get you out of there. So I've heard that a lot from other parts of the world. I know for a fact I've had people tell me that, oh, you're not as bad as Israel.
Oh, okay. I haven't been there yet, but...
One pastor told me I had a guy walk up with an M16, take me into a back room, not tell me why I was going back there. And so, I know that there's some things that are bad, but I mean, we always get intel from TSA of new ways that people are trying to test the system. So the shoes for sure are one of those things to where you can take the inner part of the shoe out and fill it up with C4. And if we're not testing your shoes and you're walking right through, there's no way we're going to know.
But will the C4 come up in the image detector?
No. So the imager machine does not scan your feet, so that's why your shoes come off and go through the X-ray.
Okay, but in the X-ray machine you would see
We would see a difference in coloration. Your shoes are going to show up more likely green. The sole at least. If it starts showing up really dark orange, that's an organic mass. So we'll have to take a look. And then plus when they had those shoes that you could fill up in the sandals, they had like a little flask in there. So people were filling up those, which I would never drink out of my sandal. But they had they had like tequila, they had some sort of liquid in it. And so then eventually you had to escort them out to go dump it out somewhere, which makes them go through security again. And they're never happy when that happens.
I see.
Or they throw away their sandals, which they're not going to do that either.
Right. Okay, so speaking of coloration, right? So, and I don't know if this is like confidential information but it's it's something that I was always curious about. So, when you put your luggage on or whatever, your belongings on the belt, right? And it goes through the image detector, right? And then there's a person sitting and watching, right? What is it that you look for? Like,
well, we're trained in the beginning, and when I was in 2006, since it was still fairly new after 9/11, our training was about a month long. And so we did do X-ray a lot. We practiced. They had computer images to where you would practice, and so a lot of the images they would run through are just normal bags, or you would see items that were the PI stands for, I mean, I forget what power source, initiator, explosive,
Oh.
and all these things. So basically, these are the things that make a bomb.
Okay.
So you'll see a switch, oh, that's the S switch, and so you see a toggle switch, and you have to learn what that looks like
Okay.
in an X-ray machine. Because when you hold in your hand,
Uh-huh.
it's going to look different on a machine.
Okay.
So what we're looking for is basically guns,
Okay.
for sure, knives,
Uh-huh.
any hard metal, any weapon that you could use. So people had hammers and stuff like that. My second day in the job, I had a guy who brought a full chainsaw. And I was like, and I literally remember picking it up going, you can't take this. And he's like, I don't know what the issue is. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't know the issue? So...
But like he could have like
Checked
taken
it
it
in.
apart and checked it as
he could have checked
okay,
it. He could have
okay.
left it whole and
He
checked
had
it
it
in.
as a carry-on.
Yes. And he just told us to throw it away. And it was a
What?
$500 chainsaw. So I was...
God.
People do some funny things going through an airport. I've seen a lot of things in people's bags.
Okay, well, chainsaw is like pretty obvious, but like things that like a gun or a knife or something, you have to know what that looks like in an X-ray version, right?
A gun's pretty easy to figure out. There are some guns that are plastic,
Okay.
but they still stand out because a bullet. You can't. I mean, you could make a plastic bullet, but
Okay.
it would be pretty useless.
Okay.
Um,
And so did things like metal or the C4 or whatever, like you mentioned, green and orange color. What are other colors that?
That's primarily it. It varies from blue to like a light green, which means that it's just like a really cheap metal,
Okay.
and then going into orange.
Okay.
There's not many other colors.
Okay. And do you think there's a reason that they chose green and orange?
I just think that's how when they probably started testing out the machine, how the items actually just started showing up. I don't
Okay.
think they are able to pick
Okay, got it.
how it is. I think it's just how which I'm not sure what X-rays,
Uh-huh.
and I think that's just how it determines how it is.
Okay. Wow, that's really, really fascinating. Okay, so my next question for you is thinking from like a cognitive perspective, right? So what are some of the challenges of your job as being a TSA, or were the challenges of your job? And I mean, but even in like in security these days, right? You have
Yeah.
to be vigilant, like, and so the tough thing about vigilance, right, as Norman Mackworth pointed out in his 1948 studies, is he showed the operators a clock, right? And for 2 hours they were staring at this clock, and it would just like tick, 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 right from one line to the next.
Mm-hmm.
And what they had to do was they had to detect when it would jump 2 bars, right, in a 2-hour period. So like you said, when they're sitting in a room and there are very few passengers, right, if nothing is happening, it's very easy to become fatigued or lose motivation or whatever,
Oh, yeah.
right? So like it's not a surprise that if it jumps once in 2 hours, right, people are going to not notice that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But that's an experiment, right? So how do you think that vigilance is difficult, in a job like a TSA operator?
For TSA, it's hard to say because we did change our bids every 6 months. So you could go 6 months of having a really good team you're working with,
Okay.
and
What's
the job.
a bid? I'm sorry.
Oh, we bid for our schedule.
Oh, okay, okay.
So it's always changing because summertime's going to have their peak time,
Okay.
and then slow time. So they adjust our schedules to work for the peak times.
I see.
If you had a really good checkpoint of screeners working with you that you knew throughout the years, the job it's actually more fun.
Okay.
The hard part is the public.
Okay.
The public is what makes it to where it's really where you have to be more vigilant and remember what your job is. I've been called every racial slur you could think of.
Because you forced them to check their bag,
or they had a bottle of water in their bag and I was being racial, and I'm just doing my job. I've had plenty of altercations where it's a yelling match back and forth, and and I hate to say it, but when the first passenger that comes aggressive towards you, you could brush that off. The second passenger, you could brush it off. When you get to the 50th passenger within the first hour of your shift, because it's early in the morning, it takes a toll on you. But like I mentioned, the people that you work with is what gets you through the day. If you are able to find the humor in the job, it makes the job a lot easier. And we all knew what the mission was when we got in there. It has changed over the years. I mean, we're going on 16 years since 9/11 happened,
right.
And so the people tend to forget, the reason why TSA was formed, and at first it was definitely needed. I would honestly say that yes, it's still needed because with all the intel that we heard and got, which I can't share,
right, that's fine.
it's one of those things to where it's like you need that presence.
Mm-hmm.
Will it evolve? I mean, I've been out for 2 years. I'm pretty sure it has evolved over time. But when it comes to the job, I mean, the vigilance part is not easily broken. I would say that most of the people who are working there know what you're supposed to be doing.
Okay.
You will have your tough days, but you know you get through it.
Cool. And then you mentioned that you guys have a month of training, and I know there are certain jobs that have some sort of like an assessment before you
Yeah.
go into the job. Like, can anybody become a TSA? And what is the noun? I'm sorry, like TSA worker or operator? Or,
TSO, you would actually say.
TSO.
So,
Okay.
Transportation Security Officer.
Officer.
Yeah.
Okay. So, can anybody become a TSO? Or
Anybody
do you have
could
to
apply.
do you have to pass certain tests or something?
Well, when I was in, it was I actually when I applied for the job, since I knew it as TSA, I applied for Covenant Aviation, which I didn't know was that. I just assumed it was another security company inside the airport.
I see.
So when I went in for there, I was doing an X-ray test, and I was like, "Oh, I'm not qualified for this job," because I was thinking that I was in for a medical field.
Oh,
and then they basically explained to me, "Oh no, you're just a TSO. We're contracted." So at that time, we had to do the X-ray test. You had to do basically a physical agility test. You had to pick up a bag that weighs 70 pounds in. I think it was in 5 minutes. You had to lift it up like 15 times and take it across the room. So eventually, you were winded a little bit. It was that day for interview process was a long day. It took 8 hours.
Oh my gosh.
And so at that time, at the end of the day, I didn't know I had the job until I got a call like 2 days later. I've talked to friends recently who are in it. They actually have a more in-depth training for the new employees who go in. I believe they actually get flown out to, I want to say Georgia, somewhere over there, to do more of an intense training.
Wow.
So it has evolved because the threat has evolved.
Okay.
When we first were there, we were thinking just blocks of C4, and then you had the liquid bombs, and then you had underwear bombs. And so the terrorists are always, I would hate to say, one step ahead.
Right.
And then TSA has to figure it out and then get ahead of that.
Okay. Have you ever experienced a time where the machine did not detect something, but you did?
I would say, no, because the X-ray machines don't really fail.
Okay.
I would say that they're 100% on. It's more the human error if you were distracted.
Okay.
There's always that possibility because we are just humans, you know. So you hear a noise, you see an attractive passenger, you're gonna look. But for the imager machine, I would say that there has been times to where a cell phone or a wallet would be in the back pocket and the machine didn't see it. So that's why it's our job to, we walk around, and we take a look at your body contour, and we'll be like, hey, we see your cell phone, we got to run it through the X-ray.
Okay.
So the imager machine, when I was there, had its faults. Like I said, I don't know if it's evolved over time, but the X-rays and the screeners, we're on it usually.
Cool. Yeah. So all of those things together,
Yes.
pretty much guarantee a safe passenger.
Exactly.
Cool. So I have one question again. So I know that there's this policy where you have to, if you have a laptop, you have to take it out of the case, right?
Yes.
Put it in a bin by itself, and then let it go through. But like iPads or cell phones, those are okay. So what is it that sets? Is it because it's bigger and you could have more things in
laptop has more guts to it. You could remove the outer layers of it and fill the inner parts with an explosive matter.
I've actually seen that the other day. Literally, like the TSO, he like unscrewed the whole laptop and
really?
And I was just like, oh my god, what is going on? But
that could have been a test. We do test ourselves, so that could have been possibly a test bag.
Okay.
So they basically will show you this is what you're seeing.
I see.
This is what you see in an X-ray, but now you can see it visually. Now you can put those two together.
Wow.
iPads, cell phones, they're too thin.
They're too thin.
You know, if you saw a cell phone go in, it was just the case, and it had no guts to it.
Okay.
Then that would definitely stand out more.
I see.
The reason why you take them out is because if you have a laptop in your bag with papers and everything on top of it, you're not getting a clear view of the laptop. With now the program they had when I left and it's still going on, TSA PreCheck, you go basically through a background check like if I got a job.
Okay,
and
I was actually going to ask you about TSA PreCheck, but continue because you nailed it anyway.
Yeah, you go through a background check like if you're getting a job with TSA. They're making sure you have to put references down. You have to do an interview. It's not something that you just kind of like skate in.
But I noticed that right now at the airports, the TSA pre-check line is longer than the actual
Yes.
non-TSA line.
Yeah. So when I was there, you could have been there when I was working there. They weren't getting the numbers. I think when they first announced it, because I think most people don't trust the government. You know, they don't want to, and most people they like to have their privacy. When you find out that the government's going to dive into your private pass and everything like that, people are going to be a little hesitant to it. So at that time, they were giving people a taste. Like, oh, here, go ahead, try TSA pre-check and see what you like about
I
it.
see. Okay.
For us as officers who are working, we didn't like that.
Okay.
Because you're taking people who haven't been cleared to go now test this process out.
Right.
So for a TSA pre-check, I mean, it was a nice thing. People could leave their shoes on. But like you said, yeah, now it's overflowed.
But okay, in the event, so what constitutes TSA pre-check? So besides you leaving your shoes on, what else?
You leave your shoes on. You can leave if you had like a lighter outer garment, jacket, or something like that. You could leave that on. If you have a metal hip, when I was there, I believe that we would do a much more faster pat down.
Okay.
Because you've kind of gone through the process with the government, and they're basically saying we trust you.
Okay.
You have no terrorist ties. You're not looking to do harm.
Okay, that's fair. But what if like after you do that, like do they continuously do these background checks or like?
Yes.
Oh,
as far as I know, yes. I do know that if you do go through security, because even though we have people who are in TSA pre-check and they had this great privilege to go through faster, they would still argue with us because they thought, well, I'm being cleared by the government. Why can't I take my bottle of water? You still had to follow the rules.
Right. Okay.
Things you couldn't take. It's like, okay, you're clear from the government. That doesn't mean you get to have a knife or a gun on the plane.
Of course. But also what I'm saying is, like, let's say I went through TSA pre-check, I did my interview, and then, like, a month later, I killed someone. You know,
no,
like,
they'll know.
They'll know.
You're removed. Well, granted, if you killed someone, I don't think you're going to be.
Well, no, I mean, okay. Not. But I mean, like, what if I was like convicted of some sort of a felony? So they get notified. Okay,
you're removed.
So it's like an.
And you can be removed if you argue with us.
Okay, good
if you
to know.
If you got to the
don't
point.
Argue
no.
with TSA.
I suggest you don't. We'll make you miss your flight.
Okay, got it. And so, so the liquid thing is because there were liquid bombs.
Yes.
Okay. So, like, everything with the toiletries and the, like, what is it's like...
3.4 ounces.
Okay.
In a quart-sized bag.
Okay.
Not a gallon.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, I'm sometimes pissed off about that, too. Like, I want to take perfume, and I don't have a luggage,
well, actually, perfume is, most bottles are only 3.4 ounces, so you're okay.
Yeah. So, okay, cool. And then, so I have one sort of last dramatic question for you. What is, like, one of the scariest things that you've ever seen at your job?
I was there when 2 guys from Yemen came in. I was doing a program where we would go to random gates.
Okay.
Or we would be assigned from TSA. These are certain gates to do another additional screening. We got called from one of our terminal managers to come back to Terminal 3.
Okay.
Because there was a suspicious bag that was in the X-ray.
Okay.
By the time we got, if you've ever been to San Francisco International Airport, in Terminal 3, there's that part where there's the gates, and then there's a long walkway to the gates all the way down. So we were in the far part. So by the time we got the call, made our way back, half of the terminal's been shut down. Nobody's being allowed through security. You look at the west checkpoint at the time, which was the big checkpoint. It was like 8 lanes. There's only SFPD. FBI was already on scene. And
by the time you walked from one end?
They were very quick on it. So we probably were a little late to the game.
Okay.
They needed more people to stop the crowd.
Okay.
So we ended up getting told by our managers that these guys, they believe, were doing a dry run to see if they could sneak a bomb through the checkpoint, which they later found out because the SFPD bomb squad took the bag, took it to wherever they go, and they blew it up.
And it blew up?
No, well, they purposely blew it up.
Oh, okay.
So they were able to figure out from the images and the pieces they were picking up that they took bubble gum, wrapped it up with duct tape, then took cell phones, wrapped those up on top of it, wrapped it with wires to make it look like it was a bomb fully put together.
Oh.
And they put that through the X-ray. And then when they questioned them, the questions they were asking was like, were you been with your bag the whole time? Who's the bag belong to? And their answers are always different. It would turn out to be my brothers. It was my uncles.
Was it in English?
No.
It was through an interpreter?
I believe, yeah.
Okay.
And granted, I wasn't getting paid to be over there.
No,
So,
totally.
so that was probably one of those things because when you go through this long period of time and the things you're taking away are, little bottle openers with knives on it.
Right.
Once in a while you would have a person forget they have bullets or they actually had a gun,
Wow.
and then all of a sudden it turns into. These guys are from Yemen,
Uh-huh.
and they're testing the system now. And then it turned out to where they held them, I think, questioned them more, and then they released them the next day.
Uh-huh.
But they were able to determine that they had terrorist ties,
Oh
and
my
this was a
gosh.
test. They have a terrorist magazine called Insight, I believe,
Okay.
and they advertised San Francisco International Airport,
Oh my gosh.
saying that because it was a contract security company, and we basically had TSA's rules, and then we had our own, and we always we did more. That's why a lot of people, when they travel through there, were like, they didn't do this in Dallas. They never did this in JFK. Why does this happen over here and not here? Well, we were a contract company. We had to do more if we wanted to keep the contract.
Okay.
So they put it in the Insight magazine that since we were a contract company, it'd be harder for you to get through with a IED,
Nice.
which is good to hear because
Yeah.
I didn't want that happening there.
Yeah, I know in the Middle East, because I travel there as well. I've been to Egypt, I've been to Morocco, I've been to Lebanon, Turkey, and so in a lot of these airports, actually in all of them, when you first enter the airport, there's a security checkpoint right there.
Oh, yeah.
So you have to scan your luggage immediately, and then when you check your bag and then you go to your gate, there's another one.
I didn't know that. My wife's from the Philippines, and she mentioned that. None of the public's even allowed basically into the airport.
Right,
You're screened there,
yes,
and that's it.
Exactly. Only the passengers, the travelers.
Yeah.
Like no family. You have to say your goodbyes outside, and then like the line is always wrapped around the building. And at first I didn't understand why, but then I realized right when you enter the door, it's like the belt right away. So.
I was actually there also for the Asiana plane crash.
Oh no.
So I was working that day when that happened. So that was a little nerve-wracking for the fact that we didn't know what happened at first. Mm-hmm. We just knew that planes were grounded and nobody's coming through this, the checkpoint, and then you have the passengers getting upset because they're not being told anything and they're looking at us like, why? What's going on?
Right, but sometimes they purposely, right? They don't tell.
Well, they don't want a mass panic.
Yeah, exactly.
And we understand. Then once we found out, then we're, you're not working the day. It's time to go home.
Wow.
So they closed the checkpoint, and so I wasn't. Like I said, I started in 06, so I wasn't there when 9/11 hit, but I had a lot of friends who were, and they said that was the weirdest thing because they would show up to work, but nobody would be in the airport.
Oh my god.
And they said, I think the airport was closed for like 4 days.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so it's it's a crazy world we live in.
Yeah. So just a final question. I know I've said 3 times the last question, but just a final question. What made you want to become a TSO?
Well, like I mentioned, at that time I needed a job, so I applied.
Does it pay well?
Yeah, I mean, I was making the most money at the time that I did in any other job.
Okay.
I would, prior to that, I worked for a plumbing company that was non-union, so I worked like 16-hour days for $10 an hour, and it was really hard. Mm-hmm. Then I moved on to sheet metal, hoping I get into an apprenticeship there, and that didn't pan out. So when I quit that job, I was looking for another one, and I applied for a ton. And Covenant was the one that called, and I went, and when I got in there, I was like, well, I'll give this a shot. I had really no interest in security.
I see. Okay.
But then the airport is it's a great place. I always tell people it's a great place to work because it's air conditioned during the summer and it's warm during the winter.
Nice.
So it's a comfortable place, and as long as you're able to take what the traveling public likes to offer you sometimes, you're able to put that aside and remember that's not personal.
Yeah.
It's a good place to work.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks so much,
Of
Chris. Thank you so much for telling us all about the mysteries and the myths, and the truths of being a TSO. And, a lot of people are always really curious about particular job requirements or the things that you have to do. And so, in terms of vigilance, right, like it's really important, like you said, to have that human factor, right? So
very true.
even though we have the assistance of technology, which is great and wonderful to make sure that, the safer the better, but still it shouldn't replace, like you said, the human eye. So thanks so much, and thanks everyone for tuning in. See you next time.
Thank you.